Well, good morning, Vineyard. How are you guys? Good. Good morning, everybody watching online. Glad you're here too. We got great morning. We're wrapping up our series, How to Be Rich. If you've missed this series, you can go online and watch the other sermons. They're on there, and I encourage you to do so. This has been a monumental sermon series. Before I jump in, though, just want to make you aware of one thing. As we've talked about earlier in the fall, our pastor of church life, Barry Bowman, is retiring at the end of the year. And next weekend after this service, we're going to have a kind of a reception for him back in MP1, which is our multi-purpose room on this floor back. If you go back the hallway, you'll get there eventually. So plan on sticking around and wishing he and Brenda well as they prepare for this next phase of life. We're really excited for them and some of the things that they have on their schedule, and I think God's going to really use them in retirement as well. So and it's been a huge blessing here. So at any rate, just wanted to make you aware of that. Also, I want to say thank you for bringing food in. Look at all this food up here. This is amazing. So we've been doing all kinds of fun things to be generous, and we'll talk more about that later in the message. But what we're basically doing, if you're new here this week, just to catch you up, we are practicing being rich, because in 1 Timothy chapter 6 and verse 17 and 18, the Apostle Paul tells Timothy, his protege, he says, "Command people who are rich in this world to be generous, to be kind, to be giving, and all of these things. And so be generous and be rich in good deeds." And so we've been practicing that over the last 4 weeks, and we've seen some amazing, amazing things. Now, the reason we decided we needed to talk about this, one, it's in the Bible, and we try and teach what's in the Bible. Two, we're not typically, statistically, Americans aren't very good at being rich. And the reality is we are rich. We don't feel rich all the time. Most of us don't feel rich, mostly because we're comparing ourselves to our neighbors, right? We compare ourselves to ourselves. But if you look at the big picture of our world, we are wealthy beyond our wildest imaginations. If you live in America, you're in the top 10%, by default, in the top 10% of some of the wealthiest people on the planet. If you make $40,000 a year, you're in the top 4% of the wealthiest people on the planet. If you make $48,000 a year, you're in the top 1% of the wealthiest people on the planet, but you don't feel rich, do you? And so we need some perspective to kind of remind ourselves how stinking blessed we are. There was an expression that came out, it was all over the internet several years ago, called first world problems. Anybody remember that? And we really do have first world problems. People around the world would kill to have the problems that we have. You know, I have bad cell phone coverage. This is the worst. I mean, it's a first world problem. You know, or YouTube commercials. How many people hate YouTube commercials? You got to wait 15 seconds. 15 seconds to watch any video content ever created in the history of the world. It's awful. I don't know how we live. It's a first world problem. Or slow internet connection. This past week, my internet connection, I pay for a 6 megabyte line, and you know, you people with Comcast, anyway, 6 megabyte line, and it dropped down under 1 megabyte, and so it was slow. It was functional, but I had to wait for pages to load. I mean, oh my gosh, it was the worst. I mean, I can't even believe it, you know. And then I called my internet provider, who shall remain nameless, although their initials are Frontier Communication. They're awful, all right? And so, if you work for Frontier, I'm sorry, but I've had their techs actually tell me, we're awful. The techs aren't awful, but the Frontier. But they're cheap, and I'm cheap, and it works out really well. And so I'll put up with the bad service, and it breaks every once in a while, and they have to come fix it. And so I called, and I said, "What's going on?" They're like, "Oh, there's an outage. We have to come fix your line." And I'm like, "Okay, when are you going to come fix my line?" They said, 2 days. I said, 2 days? I can't deal with this. I have to wait 2 seconds for my pages to load. I have to deal with this for 2 days? 2 days. It was awful. It was awful. One time I went to the DMV. Anybody ever been to the DMV? All right. I love it. It's a shared experience we all have. I went down, I needed a new driver's license, right? And so they changed the law or whatever, and my driver's license was going to expire in like 6 months, and I thought, well, I'm going to get it taken care of today. So I got my old driver's license and like a couple bills and a couple forms of identification. And you go down to the DMV and you have to get in line to get in line, right? You get in the first line and you have to wait to get to the counter where they look at your documents and tell you whether you have what you need or not, and then you get in the second line. Well, the first line was 25 minutes long, and I'm kind of getting impatient as I'm waiting in line. 25 minutes, it's a long time. And so, but I'm cool, it's all good. I got everything I need. Get to the counter, put my stuff on the counter. The lady looks at me and kind of smirks. You ever get that? And it's like, yeah, you don't have what you need. And she goes, you don't have a valid form of identification. And I'm like, it's my driver's license. If this isn't a valid form. So basically she said, you're not going to get a new driver's license unless you go back home and get a bunch of other stuff. And so I spent my entire day driving between Moundsville and Wheeling and coming back and waiting in a line that's 4 times longer now to get to that counter, to get to the next line, to get to that counter, to get my driver's license. I got it. I should have given up, but I got it. Now, I share all this. These are all first world problems. For crying out loud, I have a car, right? You have a car, most likely. And so we are some of the wealthiest people on the planet. These are problems that people in the developing world would kill to have, but we don't have it. And I share this to give us perspective, because we look at stuff that is not all that bad, and then we look at situations where the reality of the fact that we even have that situation means we're blessed beyond our wildest imagination, and we're going, that's the worst, right? I found this video. This is one of my favorite comedians. His name's Tim Hawkins, and he talks about this, and this is just, I'm sharing this with you because it makes me laugh, and hopefully it makes you laugh, but it gives us a little bit of perspective, so enjoy.
We overuse this phrase the most, that's the worst. You ever heard people say that? That's the worst. That's the worst. Really? That's the worst. That is the worst. My wife and I dropped our daughter off at the mall not too long ago. She was there to meet her friends, and her friends weren't there yet. My daughter was distraught. She was like, oh, my friends. My friends. That's not how she talks, but it's really funny. My friend, my friend. My friends aren't here. My friends aren't here yet. Now I can't go shopping. I have to wait for them until they get here, until I can go shopping. And my wife was like, I know, honey. That's the worst. Really? That's the worst? Being stuck in the mountains or being lost, out at sea with sharks circling around you. You're not in more of a pickle there? That's the worst. Can you imagine like those Chilean miners? Remember those Chilean miners a few years ago? Got stuck in that mine for like 30 days. Do you think they're down that mine going, oh no. This is no good right here, man. We've been down in this mine for a long time, We got no food to eat, we got no water to drink. There's not a lot of air left to breathe. We may not live to see another day, my friend. This is the worst. The only thing that I can think of right now let me finish, please. The only thing, this is bad right now, the only thing that I can think of right now that could possibly be worse than this is, sometimes when you're at the mall and your friends aren't there to meet you yet, and you want to go shopping, but you can't, so you gotta wait around on the curb for like 10 minutes or something. I tell you what, this is bad, my friend, but that is the worst right there, my friend. I tell you.
Little perspective. Sometimes we might just have the perspective of a teenage girl at the mall. I don't know. I share all that not to make us feel guilty. I pray that God blesses you with abundance. I really do. And I don't want any of us to feel guilty about that. I want you to feel grateful about it. Guilt is a horrible motivator, but gratitude changes things. And I think because we spend so much time comparing ourselves to ourselves, we lose sight of how blessed we actually are. And when we lose sight of how blessed we actually are, we start to hold tightly to our stuff. But if you can get in touch with how blessed you are, if you can live with a heart of gratitude, it changes everything. It really does. We say it around here this way: grateful people are generous people. And we have so much to be grateful for. We have all of our blessings, of course, all of our material blessings, of course. But the God of the universe loves us so much that he sent his only son to come after us and die on a cross to pay the penalty for our sins so that we could spend eternity with him and have a relationship with him right now. And we have so much to be grateful. Even if we had nothing, we have so much to be grateful for. And out of that gratitude comes this overflow of generosity towards other people. And that's what this series has been all about. Now, we've talked about some of the side effects of wealth that we're prone to because we live in such a wealthy nation and we have so much. You know, the idea that we live in denial, that we begin to believe that we can save our way to safety, and that our hope migrates from God to stuff. We begin to believe that if we can save enough stuff, that we can be our own God, sort of, that we can secure our lives. And in reality, when that begins to happen, we begin to give less and less, and we begin to hoard more and more, and we keep more and more for ourselves, percentage-wise, proportionately. And we begin to give less and less, and we begin to live in fear and here because we're trying to protect ourselves. And what the Apostle Paul says to Timothy is, look, don't live that way. Don't let your heart get there. And if it's there, work hard to get it back to God, because if your hope is in your stuff, you're going to not be the person that you want to be. And your relationship with God is going to suffer in the process. And the way we do this, and we talked about this last week, is we pre-decide that we are going to be generous. And we pre-decide not only that we are going to be generous, but how we're going to be generous. We're going to be generous with our time. And we pre-decide, take a look at all your time and say, I'm giving this proportion of my time to serving God and serving other people. And we look at our money and we say, I'm going to live on this much, I'm going to save this much, and I'm going to give this much. Proportionately speaking, God looks in terms of percentages, not dollar amounts, and whatever that is, and then give that first as kind of a statement, like, this is not the leftovers, this is the first part, and I'm going to build my life and my spending and saving and all that around the rest of it, but I am giving this to God and to others to make a difference. And if you will do that, it has a liberating effect on your heart, and it begins to migrate your heart from your stuff back to God. And it's all about the heart, isn't it? It's all about the heart. That's what God is after. He wants your heart more than he wants anything else. Now, we have been looking at 1 Timothy 6, verses 17 and 18 for the past 3 weeks. And we're going to go back there real quickly now, but I want to go on to verse 19, because Paul presents this idea that if you can get your heart around and your head around, it changes everything. This idea has inspired more giving and more generosity than anything else in the history of the world. And this idea that he presents, he didn't come up with it himself. This was something that Jesus taught over and over and over again. So in verse 17, it says, command those who are rich in this present world. Now, what Paul is doing here is he's tipping his hat to this idea that there's something beyond this world. There's more to this life than just this life. We live on a timeline, and we are in this world. We have this life for a specific period of time, and it's not very long, really, when you look at it in the context of eternity. But you are not a human being that has spiritual experiences. You're a spiritual being that is having a temporary human experience, and that temporary human experience might be a couple decades or it might be 100 years, but it's not very long in comparison to eternity. And so if we live in light of eternity, it changes everything. It changes the way you look at everything, but that's not what we do, is it? What we end up doing is we get focused on right now. I got to pay this bill. I got to have this fun. I got to do this thing. It's all about now, or maybe the next 20 or 30 years. I got to plan ahead for that. But we're not planning long term enough. We're not living in light of eternity. And if you can learn to live in light of eternity, it will change everything, not just how you handle your wealth and your finances, but how you handle every part of your life, because it brings a perspective. It brings a perspective that facilitates this wisdom inside of you. It's not very wise, if you're going to live forever, to live like you're only going to live for a couple years. And so it changes the way we look. Now, most Americans believe that there is more to this life than this life. Most Americans believe that there is a life after this life. 97% of us do. But at any rate, the Apostle Paul says, live in light of this fact. He says, command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain. So we've talked about that. Don't put your hope in your stuff, put your hope in God, but to put their hope in God. Don't put your hope in the provision, but the one who provides it, because the provision can go away at any point in time, but the provider never is, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. Command them to do good and to be rich. This is where we got this whole sermon series idea from. To be rich in good deeds and to be generous and willing to share. And then in verse 19, he drops this idea and he says this, in this way, in other words, in being rich in good deeds and being rich in generosity and going over and above in kindness, they will lay up treasure for themselves. Now, wait a second. Treasure. Like, isn't that the problem, laying up treasure? Like being focused on yourself and laying up treasure, isn't that the problem? Well, no, not necessarily. The problem is laying it up in the wrong place. He goes on, in this way they will lay up treasure for themselves as a firm foundation for the age to come. Paul understands there's more to this life than this life. And he also understands that how we live in this life directly affects the next life. And this is a theme that is found throughout the teachings of Jesus. If you read the Gospels, you'll see this over and over and over again. Jesus talks about eternal rewards. Great is your reward in heaven. Now, if you're not comfortable with that, like, I don't want a reward, well, take it up with Jesus, because this was what he taught. But Jesus understood, and Jesus believed, and Jesus taught there's more to this life than this life. And the quality of your life in heaven is going to be determined by the quality of your generosity in this life. Like, what we do now directly impacts how we're rewarded, how we live in the next. Now, it doesn't impact whether you make it there or not. So let me be very clear about that. The only way you get to heaven is by putting your faith in Jesus Christ, who died on a cross because the payment for sin, the penalty for sin, was death. And Jesus paid it. And if we put our faith in him and follow him, he forgives all our sins, and it's paid for and it's washed away, and we get a brand new life in Christ. And nothing takes that away, and we're going to heaven. Okay? So that's how we get into heaven. But the quality of your life once you get there is directly proportionate to the quality of your generosity now. That's the big idea. Jesus always connected eternity and money. I think, one, because he understood that the number one competitor for your faith, for your hope, for the affection of your heart would be stuff. And secondly, because when we view our stuff, our wealth, through the lens of eternity, it forces us, it causes us to loosen our grip on our money and its grip on us. Well, Jesus walks into a conversation about greed, and Jesus is like, a teachable moment, as Jesus often did. He was the king of teachable moments. And so Jesus makes up a story. This is a completely fictional story Jesus made up to prove a point. It's called a parable, and it says in Luke 12, verse 16, and he told them this parable: the ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. So we have a rich guy. He's got lots of land. He plants it all. He's got tenant farmers and everybody else who plants it all on his land, and it is a bumper crop. I mean, the rain was just right. The sun was just right. They had weather when they needed it. They had clear skies when they needed it. The harvest was perfect. He just went from a rich guy to an uber rich guy. He's got so much extra stuff, he doesn't know what to do with it. He doesn't even have a way to store it all, as we're about to find out. Now, Jesus' audience, as they're hearing this, they're not feeling bad for this guy any more than you are, right? You hear about the person who, bought Bitcoin at 30 cents, and that's now worth $10,000, and they just made $30 million. Oh, I feel really bad for you. What are you going to do with all that money, We don't usually feel bad for them. His audience isn't either. Then he said, this is what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store my surplus grain. Now, this isn't a bad idea if you have unlimited amount of time. I mean, he's got more than he'll probably ever use in his lifetime. It's not a bad idea to store up, to save now so that we can consume it later. And he was planning ahead, and that's a good thing, right? He just wasn't planning far enough ahead. He was thinking too short term. And in verse 19 he says, and I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy. Eat, drink, and be merry. Now at this point, this would have been a great lesson on savings. And let me say very clearly, the Bible is not against, I don't believe God is against, I don't believe Jesus is against planning and saving. Like if you have a 401k or an IRA or a pension, you don't have to feel bad about that. I don't believe you have to feel bad about it. I think if you read through the Bible, and especially through the Old Testament, we are encouraged to plan ahead, to think bigger picture than just today, to plan, to save, to do those things. It's okay to do those things. And so at this point, maybe everybody's gathering around. This is a lesson on savings. This is very interesting, Jesus. And it's not a bad way to go if you have an unlimited number of years. But the problem is this guy doesn't have an unlimited number of years, as we're about to read. It says, but God said to him, you fool, not for being rich. He's not a fool because he's rich. He's a fool because he misunderstood why he was rich. He was confused by his wealth and began to believe that everything that was placed into his hands was for his consumption, and that is foolish. And he didn't know why he had the extra. He said, but God said to him, you fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. So he runs out of time before he runs out of money. He runs out of time before he runs out of money. There is no correlation between how much time you have and how much money you have. You can have $1 billion and die tomorrow. It doesn't buy you extra time. It says, then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? And the answer to that question is somebody else, right? Because he's not going to take it with him. It's all piled up in barns. He can't take it with him. He's going to leave it behind, and somebody who hasn't worked for it, somebody who probably doesn't know how to handle it, so it'll ruin their life. It just got a windfall, right? Just got this huge inheritance. They got it. And not because he was generous, but because he was dead. Now, Jesus says we only get credit for what we give. You don't get credit for what you leave behind, because every one of us is going to leave the same amount behind. All of it, 100%. We're not going to take it with us. And we only get credit for what we give. We only get credit in eternity for what we give. Now, this guy lost everything because he died. But not only did he lose all his stuff, he lost the opportunity to live a life making a difference, having purpose, being the blessing, and all the blessing that brings to you as you live that way. And he lost the opportunity to send it on ahead, because it is true you can't take it with you, but you can send it on ahead in your giving. Verse 21, this is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich toward God. And again, I don't think God is against savings. That's not what Jesus is teaching here. I don't believe that. But if we keep it all, or if we consume it all, and we're stingy towards God because we need just a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit, and we buy that lie that we need a little bit more and a little bit more, and we end up being fearful and stingy in our hearts, man, that is no way to live. And we miss out on the joy of living a life of purpose, living a life on a mission, not from God, but with God, making a difference in our world. He says, this is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich toward God. When we get confused by wealth and we begin to believe that we can save our way to safety, that it's all for us, we lose sight of the bigger picture, that we're just living on we're in this life as a blip on the timeline of eternity. When we lose sight of that, we don't end up in good places in here. And we don't end up living the life that we were created to live, having the impact we were created to have, and really, quite frankly, having the fun that you were meant to have. Because when our life is all about us, man, you're not going to have much to show for it at the end. And it is fun. We've been doing this Be Rich, and these Be Rich projects, and we were out yesterday and Friday and all over the community serving. I have not had that much fun in years. It's a blast. It's so good. And Jesus lays out this new concept here. He says, this is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich toward God. And he talks about this richness towards God not being about, like, in the pagan world, it would be about, being rich towards God would be bringing a bunch of stuff to the temple, right? But Jesus says, no, this is how you treat other people. This is how, the reflection of your love for me is how you treat one another and the generosity you have towards one another. And Jesus redefines kind of being rich and being rich towards God. And so if we jump down to verse 33, he says this, he says, you're going to love this part. You ready to be uncomfortable? Everybody ready? I'm warning you ahead of time. Sell your possessions and give to the poor. Whew, I don't know how I feel about that. I mean, come on. I need my stuff, right? Well, again, I don't think Jesus is saying sell everything you have and give it all to the poor. Jesus, if you read the Gospels, there was one man that he told that to, and he was a very wealthy man, and he invited him to come and be his disciple, like in real time, follow him around the country. And Jesus was making a very clear, poignant point in that invitation. But there's nowhere else that we really see that call to sell everything. But I think what Jesus is saying is, rich people have extra stuff. Rich people have garages they can't put their cars in. They've got storage containers they pay a monthly fee for. Rich people have attics they can't get into, or closets full of clothes that are, and nothing to wear. And what if you got intentional about downsizing and decluttering? Well, first of all, your mental health would improve greatly, right? Because we all have extra stuff, and we think it's all for us. And you don't miss what you give away. You really don't. You know what you end up missing? You end up missing the bad investments or the money you wasted. But you don't miss what you give away. That stuff's the joy. All right? He says, provide purses for yourselves that will not wear out. A treasure in heaven that will never fail. And that's where this idea is in Jesus' teaching. That we can actually accumulate a treasure in heaven based on our generosity on earth. Where no thief comes near, no moth destroys. In other words, Jesus talked a little bit earlier in this passage about how wealth is so fragile. It could be here today and gone tomorrow. For where your treasure is, he says, this is so important. This is where it's at. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And it's all about the heart. And so do you want your heart parked in your bank account, in your IRA, and whatever else, your stuff, your collection? Or do you want your heart parked in the hands of God? And here's what I know. Freedom is found in God. The heart you want, the life you want to live, the person you want to be is not a fearful, close-handed, stingy rich person. You don't want to be that person. On your best days, and the thing that keeps us from opening our hands, the thing that keeps us from trusting God is fear. It's fear. You can't take it with you, but you can send it on ahead. And the quality of your life is directly related to the quality of your generosity now and your kindness. And the quality of this life and the quality of the next is directly tied to the condition of your heart. Where's your heart? And so Jesus and the Apostle Paul lay out this idea that if you will view everything you have through the lens of eternity, it will begin to free you. It will begin to free your grip on your wealth, and it will begin to free its grip on your heart. And it will change everything. And when your heart gets better, and when your heart gets freer, and when you begin to engage and become the person that God created you to be, and you're making that difference, and you're living on purpose, and you're not afraid anymore, look out, because that's who you want to be. That's who I want to be. And we all wrestle with it because we all deal with the side effects of wealth because we live in the wealthiest country that's ever existed on the face of the earth. And the side effects, they affect us and we don't even know they're affecting us. And so as Jesus taught this over and over and over again, not because he wanted people's money, but because he wanted their hearts, to a population that there were not nearly as many wealthy people, it is so much more important that we talk about it in this day and in this age. And that is the backdrop of what Paul writes to Timothy. In this way, they will lay up treasure for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age. You can't take it with you, guys, but you can send it on ahead. And if you will view your life and your stuff through the lens of eternity, it will change everything. So while you still have time, be rich well. Loosen your grip. Loosen its grip on you. And prepare for the age to come. Now, over the past 4 weeks, we have been practicing being rich. Because being rich, sometimes we just need to try it. Being rich well. And so we've been practicing generosity and good deeds. And it's really kind of a foretaste, a teaser of choosing to live this way. And so the first week we asked you all to bring in Operation Christmas Child boxes that we would pack up with Christmas presents and send them around the world to kids who wouldn't get a Christmas present otherwise. And they are on the ship right now, probably either on a truck, on the way to a ship or on a ship at this point, on their way to be delivered for Christmas. You guys brought in 535 boxes, almost 10% of the boxes for our region. Guys, there were 85 churches that participated in our region. You brought 10% of them. You guys are amazing. I mean, I'm stunned. I I want to specifically thank Brenda Bowman and Barry Bowman, who kind of spearheaded all of that. Because not only did we collect those boxes here, but we have a warehouse up the street, and we received those boxes from all those different organizations and churches and people in our community, processed almost 6,000 boxes. And so there was a whole team of volunteers, plus the Bowmans, who organized that, and just an outpouring of generosity, and got to help other people be generous too. So fun. So that was week 1. Week 2, we did a special offering. We partnered with organizations in our community that we were going to give all the money to, and we still are giving all the money away. None of it is staying here. And we sat down, we picked 5 organizations, had a team of volunteers get together, pick those organizations, come up with projects that we wanted to fund, and vetted everybody, and it was a very thorough process. And then we came to you week 2 of this series and said, let's raise $26,500 and do a bunch of good in our community and help people who need help. And you guys gave $45,000 that weekend. Phenomenal. So not only did we get to do everything we wanted to do, we got to do more than we wanted to do and bless more people in our community and shine more light. And God, it's humbling. It's humbling being a part of this church. Well, last week I came and I talked about the volunteer opportunities, because I think it's not just our money that migrates our hearts towards God's kingdom, but it's our time, when we get our hands dirty a little bit. And so there were all these volunteer opportunities, and then over between the middle of last week to the middle of this next week, we're doing all these volunteer projects. Most of them happened over this past weekend. We had hundreds of volunteers all over the community serving organizations on projects that are, I wish I had time to tell all the stories on all the projects, because they are just, I find myself kind of tearing up every time we start talking about them, but our volunteers just rocked it out. In fact, there's some of these projects are still going on. I want to thank some folks who are on that team that making that happen. At St. John's Children's Home, we have we went in with our team went in. I hadn't even been there. We sent a team of volunteers in there, met with their executive director. What do you need? What's going on? The thing that struck us was, here is an environment for boys that have been taken out of their home. They're the foster kids that are the hardest to place, boys between the ages of 8 and 14 years old. They just can't find homes for them, so they take them in there. And it's a nice building, but it was just, blank walls and concrete floors, and it was just very institutional. And so we said to them, what if we could come in and warm this up and make this feel more like a home? And they were a little tentative at first, and then they got really excited about it. And so we have had a team there since Friday afternoon. They've replaced, we've replaced carpet. We've replaced another big area of carpet with this flooring, the laminate flooring. There's a whole big room that is a rec space, and it was vinyl tile on concrete floor. It was like these kids would go in and lay on a concrete floor. We went in and we put in 3/4 inch thick foam flooring like you'd see in a gym throughout the entire thing, and put murals all over the walls. And I'm telling you, walk in and it is like, this place is amazing. And you guys made that happen. You guys, it was St. John's is a Catholic organization, right? I don't care. They are loving boys in the name. They're loving these boys who have nobody. Dang it! I wasn't going to do this. Got nobody. Coming out of situations you can't even imagine, and they're giving them a home. And if we can go in and spend some money, spend some volunteer hours, and brighten the life of these boys, that's awesome. So I want to thank Matt Dreyhaus and Erica Benda, who organized that, and also Renee Rennick, who helped design all that. Let's give those guys a round of applause. while that's all going on, there's a bunch of boys that we had to do something with. So Ashley Pegg and Allison Skibo and some volunteers gathered them up, and they've had them out Friday night, Saturday. They're going to be out all afternoon today, and they've taken them. These kids are going to be so full of sugar and they started with donuts yesterday morning, first thing in the morning, but they've taken them to TJ's, to a hockey game, bowling, to going to the movies this afternoon. They have gone out to a steakhouse for dinner. It's just when we were blessing their socks off and just loving on these kids. They're such sweet kids, such cool stuff. And then this afternoon, Erica is leading a team of folks to decorate inside and out, and we're throwing a Christmas party for the boys when they come back. We're going to do a big reveal. Don't come, just saying, because we would overwhelm the boys. We'll bring pictures and video and tell these stories in the weeks to come, but it's just phenomenal. Yesterday, I spent about 4.5 hours with John Geary, who is our coordinator for the Grow Ohio Valley Madison School Project, and we're putting a sensory garden in their courtyard, and we just went and, we said, well, how much does it cost to put in one of these gardens? And they said, it's $4,500. I said, well, we'll raise it. And so we're just paying for it. And then yesterday we had, 25 volunteers there building and working our tails off, building this garden out. And it's just started. If you want to be a part and you've missed out on that, we're going to be working all winter into the spring, getting that sensory garden. But it's amazing. It's amazing. Barb Randolph is a teacher there. She also comes to church here, and she met us there along with some of the other teachers, and they're just blown away. And Barb just gave us a rundown on the population that they work with and the incidences of trauma that these kids are dealing with and the impact that this garden's going to have. And it was just, guys, you're amazing. This is just such a cool project. And so I want to thank John for that. I want to thank John Geary and Barb Randolph. Let's give those guys a round of applause, working hard. We're doing, yesterday we met at the house of the carpenter. Rob Seyfried's one of our volunteers, and Rob met there with a team of volunteers to build wheelchair ramps. They had them all done in 2 hours. They just cranked them out. They ended up going to a Habitat house to finish up because they needed something else to do, and just doing so much good. So much good. Mike Camden, our campus pastor here at this campus, led a team of people. I think we had about 27 folks show up here and go out, fan out over the Ohio Valley to clean up the city of Wheeling. We're partnering with the city of Wheeling on that and just do a beautification thing. And so, which was, one of the things we set out at the beginning of is how do we partner with the city of Wheeling? We want to serve our city, and this was just a really great way, family-friendly way to do that. So let's give Mike a round of applause. And then, do you guys remember the free shelter meals? We came up with the idea, what if we could just take that pressure off of them and just have whatever meals they needed prepared. We're not doing all the meals for the winter, but all the ones that weren't covered, which was about 1,800, between 1,800 and 2,000, 2,000 meals. And so Cheryl Post is our kitchen coordinator, and I asked Cheryl, would you be willing to head this up? And she said, I would love to. And she has spent 4 days with volunteers coming in for different shifts, and if the building smells like food, that's why the building smells like food this weekend, because they've been cooking nonstop. We've got probably about 1,200 meals in the freezer at Ziegenfelder's Popsicle Factory, and it's and let me just say that the Popsicle Factory smells like popsicles. I think we need to arrange a tour for all of us. It's delightful. And what a cool thing to be able to partner with a business in town to make a difference in our community. So fun. Many of you have signed up to volunteer and spend the night at the homeless shelter, at the free shelter, and I hope that more of you will. It's a great way to serve. There are many of us that were at Respects over the weekend collecting more food. We call it Double Stuff the Truck in honor of our favorite cookies, and because we collect here and we collect at Respects, which is so cool. It's so fun. People walk up and they don't want to look at you. And you're like, hey, can you help us with a food drive for the House of the Carpenter? And they go, oh. And they just pick up a couple extra items, and then they run out. They go, well, I'll take a look at it. And they go in and they read the flyer, and then they'll come out. And some people, I had one guy come out Friday night, and he grabbed one bag out of the cart, and he said, the rest of it's for you. And there were like 4 or 5 bags in there. I'm like, man. Because so not only are we enjoying the generosity and the fun and the warm feelings that brings, but we're helping other people in our community do that as well. And it's so, so very cool. Feels good, doesn't it? Yeah. I would want to be a part of a church like that, I think. Yeah. So here's the deal, guys. This kind of generosity, this kind of spontaneous generosity, it's a teaser. This is how God wants us living our lives. Loving, serving, giving, open-handed, not afraid. See, spontaneous generosity warms your heart. Intentional generosity changes your heart and transforms your life. And so let me encourage you as you're tasting kind of, hey, this is kind of what this feels like, to take that next step and pre-decide, I'm going to be generous with my time. I'm going to give this amount of time. I'm going to give it first. You got an extra 52 hours a week if you work 60 hours a week. I'm going to pre-decide to be generous with my money. I'm going to give this percentage. I'm going to live on this percentage. I'm going to save on that percentage. And I'm going to be intentional about it. And if you will engage, and if you will begin to get your hands dirty and serve, and you will begin to give and become that kind of person who's not afraid, but alive. Guys, I haven't had more fun in the last 5 years than I've had in the last 2 days. And I want that for you, and so does God. It's the life you want. It's the life you're looking for. The Apostle Paul calls it the life that's really life. And this is just a taste of it. But will you decide? Will you pre-decide now? That's who I want to be. And then pre-decide, that's what I'm going to do. And then do it. And I'm telling you, there is a lot of fun waiting along the way. And if you'll do it, it'll blow your faith up big too. Because you will find that God will pour more into your life than you can give away of your time or anything else. And God will come through, and he will come through, and he will come through. And your trust in him will grow. And because of that, your relationship with him will grow, because all good relationships are built on trust. So may your faith be big. May God bless you with more than you can use, more than you can store, that you might be the blessing to our community and to our world in the name of Jesus. God, thank you so much for all that this congregation has done and all that we are doing and all that we are about to do. And I pray, God, in the name of Jesus, that you would give each and every one of us a vision for our lives that is bigger than this world, bigger than our time here, and bigger than us. Help us to be your hands and feet. Help us to engage in the life that is really life. Help us to find the freedom of intentional generosity and to live lives on purpose, serving you, serving others, making a difference. There's no greater thrill. And Lord, at the end of the day, may our hearts be in your hands and not in our bank accounts. In Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Hey, if you need prayer, our prayer team's on their way up. If you came today carrying heavy things in your life, don't leave without getting some prayer. They were up here. They would love to pray with you. Come get prayer. If you don't need prayer, well, you probably do, but if you don't, have a great week, and we'll see you next weekend for a new sermon series.